Thanks for coming in.
Happy to be here.
So, when I dreamt up this topic, I thought of asking some people who are experts in work to talk about what the value of work is. I think we all sort of can guess what we think it is, but I thought I would ask experts, as you know I want to do, to just speak about the value of work. And to that end, I start with you, and feel free to share whatever you wish for a few minutes, and take it away.
Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Hernán Prado. You can blame my parents. They were, as my drill sergeant lovingly referred to them, a bunch of damn foreigners. As am I. So, my name is Hernán. As Sam mentioned earlier, I did 3 combat tours in the United States Navy, and I love the Navy. I love the Navy because it's the only place I've ever wanted to be. I grew up in Paris, France. I grew up in Venezuela, in Washington, D.C., London, and I always wanted to be in the United States military because the U.S. military was the only organization that I had ever known of that has never systematically engaged in rape, plunder, or genocide, ever. Think about that. As a civilization, this is the only organization that has never done that in the history of humanity. And it was the only organization that was always beholden to an ideal, not to a race, a bloodline, a title. It was to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. And I think that's one of the things that we as Americans can get behind. So one of the things that I love is that the U.S. military is a galvanizing force, right? It doesn't polarize people. You know, I've never been in a combat zone, and I've never had people shooting at me and say, "Hey, you Democrat?" Right? They were just pretty happy I was there. And I relied on people that were to the left and to the right of me. It didn't matter their income level. And it was such a beautiful distillation of what the American dream was, that right then and there you had people that served our nation, served the flag, and we were all willing to give up ourselves to make sure that that moved forward. And when I was in Iraq, I remember thinking, these are people that, if we were captured in an enemy zone and were unfortunately ended up in a prison of war camp, we would literally devote the rest of our internment there to killing our captors and returning to friendly lines. And when I got back to the United States, I thought, there are all these veterans that have all this talent that have been trained by the military to do something well. We could harness that talent and get that pool of talent, retrain them, recertify them, and re-engage them in the American dream. And since 2008, we've now been named America's #1 welding school, #1 center for computer-aided design. We have more 3D printers than the United States Navy, more welding booths than NASCO and the Navy combined. And we have a 94% placement rate for every one of our graduates since 2011. So,
Great.
thanks.
Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Picard. I'm the Vice President of Operations for the San Diego Workforce Partnership, as Sam said. And I just have to say it's a big honor to be here with you tonight. It's an honor to be here with Hernán and Workshop for Warriors. I'm very familiar with the work they do, the important work and their success. I've seen those 3D printers. It's something to behold, the work they're doing. And I'm also a big fan of the rep. So when my work interests and my personal interests align, it's really a joy for me to be here and talk about the work we do. So we, the Workforce Partnership, are a workforce development agency. Had anyone heard of workforce development agencies before? We're familiar with them. Well, a few shaking hands.
I'm one of your customers.
There you go, one of our 100,000 a year. Well, those who raised your hand knew more than I did before I joined the Workforce Partnership. I was aware that career centers existed, but that was about the extent of my knowledge. But I've been in public programming for a while, and what really excites me about the work we do at the Workforce Partnership is really bridging that gap between what employers and demand needs, what our community needs from a talent pipeline, and helping those who may be the hardest to serve or are most in need of support to find that job, to find that career. So we're a majority public agency. I call us quasi-governmental, but we're also a nonprofit. So that means we get the majority of our funding from the federal government, the Department of Labor. But as an independent agency, much like SANDAG or the Housing Commission in San Diego County, we can pursue a wide variety of funding from sources to really specialize for those in need. So when I say some of those populations or those customers, what we do, in addition to running programs that serve job seekers, that train them, that give them the skills and education they need to thrive, we also have resources for businesses. How can resources sustain and grow talent? We also have a research arm, a think tank that studies regional labor market information, because if we're investing the taxpayers' dollars in training and skills program, we want to do that in ways that are smart. We want to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollar and invest that in those occupations that we know are growing. So I say the investment in an organization like Workshop for Warriors is a wise one, because what our labor market information tells us is that the #1 in-demand industry that's growing in San Diego is manufacturing. And so when we're looking at where can we invest in our skills and our training, we study that information so we can put people on the right career pathway. And so we have job centers that anyone can walk into and take advantage of services, but we also have some specialized programs for some of the populations that Sam mentioned.
So I'd like to talk about philosophy. I get a little more philosophical, guys. What is the value of work? Now, I know that you earn money and then you can pay your mortgage and you can pay your rent, but beyond that, what does work give somebody, bring to someone? What does one gain from work?
It's funny. My best friend growing up in France, he and I both have a degree in philosophy, and then he went on to become a counter sniper in Sarajevo, and I went on to become a combat medic in Iraq and Afghanistan, later on a special warfare officer. So it's funny to go, it's very easy to be a philosopher when there's no transmission linking your philosophies with your actions. It's a little bit more challenging when you have to make that critical decision of, do you take a life or not? Are you going to be kind versus weak? Are you going to be vulnerable and do something or not? And work is one of those instances where you think one thing and at the end work is, for me at least, is something where it doesn't define your personality, but it definitely gives you a very good framework by which you understand to put your philosophy into action. How are you going to benefit your community? How are you going to invest your time? Are you going to help the community, or are you going to help yourself? Are you going to do something honorable or dishonorable? Are you going to display integrity in your actions or not? Are you going to be fair or unfair? And all those things really define not who you are, maybe, but who you are at that moment and who you want to be. And work, for example, when you're in the military, that encompasses your life. Everything that you do in the military, that means that you are expected to be honorable, have integrity, trustworthy, and at a moment's notice, strap on a gun and go over there and do bad things to people, right? As we say, you go overseas and you beat people up, you take their stuff, and then you come back home and you volunteer at an orphanage, right? It's a strange dichotomy, but work really defines, I think, who you are, who you want to be, and channels you into becoming the person you would like. So work is very important. We call it the steel mesh of fabric of society in the military, right?
The steel mesh of fabric?
If you imagine that our military is almost like the steel mesh with the iron armor that America wears. Every day, you're part of that mesh, part of that armor. You know who you report to, who reports to you, where you're expected to be, what you're expected to do, expectations of your peers, demands of your subordinates. You're not a robot, but you know your place and you know what place, and you're choosing to take part in that. That is work that embodies everything for me. That's one of the reasons I love the military.
So that must pose extraordinary challenges to people when they're no longer in the military. Because what you just described doesn't describe anything I recognize as a way of living.
Well, that's exactly why. So imagine that you're doing this, and you've been, conditioned is the wrong word for it, but you're used to, you have decided to take this responsibility of taking your place, and then all of a sudden you're literally ripped out of this suit of armor, and you're just cast asunder. And that work that's Department of Defense embodies where you eat, what you wear, who you talk to, and all of a sudden you're just adrift. And it's such an overwhelming experience, particularly when you're in that uniform and you think, I would never do that. Look at these civilians, I would never be like that. I would do this, this, and this, and I would have a plan. And when you're ripped out, it is just so overwhelming.
I can hear it. I hear it. Andrew, the value of work.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about that, and the word I would say is identity. When your career brings a lot of identity to people, but your career and your occupation can mean different things depending on where you're. My last job, I washed my hands of it, I didn't think twice, and I moved on to where I'm at now very happily. I didn't have that loss. When I think about the value of work, I like to put it in a term, and the Japanese have a term called ikigai, which I'm seeing some smiling faces. If you've heard the term, it's life's purpose. And it's defined in, if you think of like a Venn diagram of meaning, and then a way to process your professional experience, you think of 4 questions to ask yourself about the work that you're doing. 1, am I good at it? Is the work I'm doing something that my skills are suited for? 2, can I support myself? Am I compensated? Am I given a value? And those are kind of the 2 most basic things we think about when we think about the value of a career. But in Ikigai, the other 2 are, do I enjoy it? So sometimes you may be good at something, but you may not really enjoy that part of your work. Do I love doing this? Do I wake up in the morning and think I want to run a nonprofit, or I want to be an accountant? And then the 5th is, am I giving back to something? Is this fulfilling? It's the mission. Is this contributing to my community? Is this contributing to the world? And the Japanese believe, under the tenets of Ikigai, that the value, if those 4 circles of the Venn diagram all intersect, then you've achieved Ikigai. And that's where your life meaning and true fulfillment can really exist. And I think sometimes we all kind of flex into that. Like, I'm going into budgeting season right now, and I'm not really good at that. I don't love it. I don't wake up in the morning thinking about getting into an Excel spreadsheet. But I think if we can recognize those kind of 4 areas of the value of work and the value of where we spend our time, that's where we can truly be contributing in a meaningful way.
But you're saying that the fifth area is the community, is giving back to the community.
The 4th is the mission, is the work that you're doing. So
okay,
you may,
maybe I misheard you.
Yeah, you may love being an accountant, and you may be good at it, and it may pay you well, but if you're doing it for big tobacco, you may not feel fulfilled by that. So the 4th element that really achieves all of that is, do you feel, is the work you're doing and where you're spending time contributing to something that you believe in?
And what is the mark of that? You obviously place people, right? I mean, you help people, both of you actually help people find a job. So what is the mark of that satisfaction? What do you see, what do you hear from someone who has found their place in that vector? Andrew, sure. I'm sorry, please.
So I would say happiness and joy is the number 1.
You mean a smile?
Yeah, a smile. But you've got to think, everyone is on a different career pathway or a different journey. And especially when we're working with someone who maybe just exited the military and has lost that identity, maybe they don't have a home to go back to, or maybe they don't know what their next step is, or how their skills as a sniper translate into the San Diego job market. Sometimes just getting the job that you're good at and pays the bills is what you need as that first step.
Sure.
And so we often think, we use a term, I'm not particularly fond of it, but I'll use it now, the ABCs, sometimes of career pathway, which is A, any job, B, better job, and C, a career. And so I think it's important that, the concepts of when you've got all 4 of those circles firing, that's happiness. That doesn't happen overnight. But what we advise people when we're developing a career plan or doing an assessment of their skills is to at least, if you're going for that any job, imagine that that's in a pathway that's going to lead to your long-term success and happiness.
I'm fortunate that it's a little bit different for us. So we only train people into careers that have a median salary of $60,000 a year. So the idea is after 4 months, the median salary is $60,000 for our graduates. And the challenge for that is for any of you here that have children or grandchildren, how do you get a young guy or gal that served in the military that has this tremendous financial inertia of credit card bills, mortgages, what daily life, right? And all of a sudden they no longer have that paycheck coming in, but they still have that financial inertia. And it's a lot easier to just stay in the sidelines and say, oh, well, you shouldn't do blah, 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 but it's a lot harder at the moment of when you're trying to figure out what am I doing next, that uncertain job offer didn't materialize, oh, now I'm moving to Arkansas, where something happened to your child, the car breaks down, and all of a sudden, they're out of the military. None of that support structure that they had is there. So for me, it was very, very important to kind of leapfrog, make sure that every one of our graduates started off at least $18 an hour. Because as you probably know, you can spend a lifetime on minimum wage jobs. A lifetime. And you can't live that way in San Diego. So our goal is, just like in the military, right? We hold the line. Like nobody that comes and talks to our students is allowed to even talk to them unless they promise in writing that they're going to give them at least an $18 an hour career. No one. And 94% of them, since we started. The 6% that don't answer are up at SpaceX and Boeing, and they're too busy to answer, but they make a lot more than that. So the things that I love are when we first started out, we were scrapping to make mortgage payments every month on this place, scrapping to make sure that we paid utilities, paid the instructors, and my wife and I would look at each other, and we were literally white-knuckling it, trying to make sure that we got the next paycheck, and I remember one evening my wife turned to me at around midnight, and she said, hey, and she tapped my shoulders. And I was like, too tired. She tapped my shoulders and goes, no, listen, you need to come up with $50,000 by tomorrow, or we won't make payroll. And then she put a pillow over her head and went to sleep. And I remember standing here like, what? What did she? I tapped her again, and she goes, no, I'm tired. I said, no, really, what did you just say one more time? She said, well, you need to come up with $50,000. You need to come up with $50,000 by tomorrow, or we don't make payroll. And I was like that for the rest of the evening, but the next morning I called a donor, we were able to figure things out. But that day, where I was trying to figure out how to get that $50,000, my wife and I and several members of our team were in this conference room, and we were all looking at each other, like, how are we gonna make this happen? We don't wanna sell vehicles, we don't wanna sell this, because then we won't, we'll make 10 cents on the dollar, and we need them in a month. And we hear this knock on the door. My first inclination, right, was like, go away, we're busy. But, fine. Right? So we let the person come in, and this guy comes in. And he said, can I speak with you? Big room full of people. I said, of course, yes. So everyone left except for my wife and I. And this guy came in and said, I just want to tell you, if it hadn't been for your program, I would have killed myself. And again, I'm rewinding from, $50,000 to what did I just hear? I said, please have a seat. So he sat down. I said, say again what you just said. And he said, I've been in the Navy for 17 years. I had 2 combat tours. I have 2 children. And when I came back from my last combat tour, what I did overseas was so horrible. I didn't want to be near my family. I didn't want to be sleeping next to my wife. I didn't know what I was going to do at night. And I was totally lost, and I was angry about what happened. I was upset and frustrated that I wasn't with my family. I was disappointed in myself that I couldn't get over this. And I literally stayed in my room for almost a year. A year. Until I heard about your program on the radio. And he came to our school. He was on 24 medications. And by the time he left, he was on 0. And that was the day that he came into my office and said, your school gave me hope, gave me a career, and I'm able to put food on my family, and I can look at my wife and my kids and know that once again I'm providing for my family. And that changed my life. And he left, and I looked at my wife and I said, we'll figure it out.
Thank you. Andrew, I was told you're the master of many valuable statistics. What percentage of people would say my work makes me happy? I'm not trying to set you up. I'm just curious if you have any sense of it. And then you can tell us a real statistic.
Yeah, so I can't tell you how many people are happy in their job. What I can tell you is that of people currently employed, about 40% of San Diegans are either looking for another job or looking to grow in their career. So I think something to think about, and the head of our research team would laugh if you called me the keeper of statistics, because I'm not always the best, or I'm okay with, generalizing statistics when needed, especially on a grant application. What I can tell you about satisfaction in work is the very real fundamental, and Hernán does an amazing job of this, of making sure that people that are graduating from this program are going into high-paying careers. I think the sad story about a great economy is that we failed to capture the people who are working multiple jobs, who are struggling with multiple jobs to live a self-sustaining wage. So a lot of what we do when we're taking statistics and measuring the research is look at what is that self-sustaining wage in San Diego across our region, and how can we drive to that. The other thing to remember when you hear statistics about the labor market, so when you hear the unemployment rate in San Diego, it's usually our agency who's feeding that to the local news stations. And unemployment last week, if you saw for the month of March, ticked up a little bit. And so economists are watching that closely. We went from 3.5% locally to 3.7%. Something that really opened my eyes when looking at the labor market that I didn't know till I went to the Workforce Partnership is that you can run labor market data in a lot of ways. And when we see a 3.7%, that number is of people who are actively looking within 6 months. And I never knew that. It doesn't count all the people who after 6 months gave up because it was too hard out there, or are now homeless because they couldn't find a place to live or lost their job. When you factor that in, unemployment levels for our region look as high as 12 to 16%. And when you look at those numbers of unemployment across some of those populations where we want to focus our services and get into the workforce, it's more staggering. We're at 3.7%, which is good. California's average, we're lower than that. California's around 4% right now. Nationally, we're a little bit higher than that. For veterans, it's double that. So veterans leaving the military, we see twice the unemployment figures. When you look at San Diego youth, 16 to 24-year-olds, we're seeing quadruple the unemployment rates. And so statistics can tell a lot of stories. And I think it's important to, when you're looking broadly across the community, look at those populations who may be suffering more, and that's traditionally disadvantaged communities of color, our servicemen and women who are exiting the military, individuals with disabilities. These are populations we'd say have the highest barriers to employment.
So with this very low rate, at least of published unemployment, which is very low historically right now, right? Is the American worker better off than ever?
I would say no. It's important to look at unemployment data as well as wage growth. So our economy is growing and we're adding more jobs, and that's a wonderful thing. But you need to look at two factors in my mind. Is our wages keeping up with the demand for our jobs? And so we've seen that wages have been slightly stagnant, despite some tax benefits that employers are receiving, that big businesses receiving, more so now than ever. That ripple down effect we haven't seen quite yet across wage growth. So for me to say that the American worker is doing better than ever, I think I would need to see mean wages go up a little bit more.
Go ahead.
I completely agree with you, Andrew. And one thing that you may not know of is, again, Andrew's organization, they put through 100,000 people a year, right? So getting 100,000 people into a job, period, instead of on the streets and the ERs and prisons is a tremendous accomplishment. So it really is. And you and your team did a phenomenal job. So I didn't want what I said earlier to be taken negatively at all. 600 people versus 100,000 is a huge world of difference, right? The Secretary of the Navy calls us the SEAL team of manufacturing, and as you may know, there are this amount of SEALs and there are this amount of people in the military, right? So what you do is crucial for our nation, it's crucial for San Diego. Then with that, it's important to note that minimum wage jobs, again, I don't want to sound like a socialist, it's not the intent, I'm just looking at it from as an economist. Well, my father was an economist, my wife is a survey methodologist, I'm a big fan of data. And if you think about it, for those of us that have children, if you're making $12 an hour, you can't live in San Diego unless you work another job. And if you're working the other job, you can't take care of your kids, right? You just cannot be there. So then, if you can't take care of your kids, what do? Who's gonna teach them, who's gonna show them? Then they wind up teenage pregnancies, gang activity, criminal activity, or just they don't know what to do. They're not doing well in school, they just drift. So I think there's a higher societal cost for minimum wage jobs than was available at the surface. I think that's very important that as a society we realize kind of the total cost of ownership of a minimum wage job in a society that's pretty expensive, right? And there's a very large delta between the haves and have-nots, and it keeps growing and growing and growing, and they're kind of working themselves into the ground, and the people over here keep making more and more money, and I wish there were a more equitable way, and that's what we're training people to do, actually. We're training how to roboticize kind of more menial jobs, and training people to program equipment, maintain equipment, install robots to do things that we don't need people to do, and then have people that can actually lift their gaze higher and not worry about survival, they're working about thriving. And that's one of the things that I think San Diego is going to be the epicenter. If you look back 150 years from now, I think you're going to find that Workshops for Warriors in San Diego were the epicenter for America's green manufacturing renaissance. I think you're going to see that there's going to be a transformation in growth in manufacturing, this infusion of technology, robotics, and human dignity. And I think that's going to help us pull forward, and California leads the nation, financially, technology, societally, and I wish that will ripple through.
There's much to think about. There's many of the things they're talking about you'll hear in the play tonight, interestingly enough. I'll let Lynn nod.
Pennsylvania, not California.
Pennsylvania, yes.
Somebody say something about the red states.
Right, well, yes, you're referring to the fact that the play takes place in a red state and features what some people call the birth of the Trump voter in the play that you're about to see tonight, and the issues that you're talking about. I wanted to ask this question. Do you have any statistics that tell you that people who work with their hands and make things are happier than those that only work with their minds?
Oh, absolutely. We have so many people that come to our school that would literally, you show up at 0600 and there will be people waiting on our doorstep, and there's a big sign that says, all veterans welcome. And you'll have very senior people. We have a neurosurgeon that went through our program, 33 years in the Navy, and he said, I was so tired of writing emails. And at the end of the day, I had 24 well-crafted emails. And he said he was so senior, he wasn't performing surgery anymore. And he just wanted to leave work one day and have something in his hand that he built. And if you see the expression on kids' faces, I did a bet with Mayor Faulkner that we could train anyone. And we trained the youngest certified welder in America at our school at 15 years old. We trained the youngest certified computer-aided designer in the world at our place at 16 years old. And this kid was going down the wrong path, getting into gang activity. And when he went through this program, he said, I had no idea that someone could do that. I had no idea. And it completely changed his trajectory. And the people that go through our program say, I was a IT or a sniper or whatever, and that's not great in polite society, but now I can design a part, I can manufacture a part, I can weld something, and the feeling of accomplishment is tremendous.
What about the people that you work with? Do you believe that people who work with their hands generally are happier than those that don't? Who make things with their hands?
I can't speak nearly as confidently as Hernán can about people working with their hands, because we serve all industries and all occupations.
Yeah.
But in my experience, and kind of alluding back to the themes of fulfillment that I think people get in the identity and the value of work, is there's nothing quite like the feeling of accomplishment when you finish something and you have a tangible product to say, I've completed that and that contributed. That's your skills, that's your time, that's where you've exerted your energy. And I can relate to the doctor because I spend a lot of time emailing, and I feel really happiest when I've completed a grant application. I did a lot of writing, a lot of work. I've submitted it, there's a bow on it, I brought people together from multiple teams to contribute to that. And whether winning or losing, I got to do some creative work where I put my philosophy into something and got to see that finished. And I think whatever your industry, you can relate to that kind of sense of accomplishment. Instead of, a lot of people you say, in work you feel like you're pushing a big boulder uphill a lot, and where's that boulder going? So I think anytime that you can call a job done and point to a finished product, there's a lot of joy to be found in that.
It's interesting in my job because my job was done last night at about 9:30, and it starts again at 8 o'clock as the director of this play. So it's never done. It continually is reborn and rebirths and recycles every day. The other thing I will say, that some of you may have heard me say this before, but years ago I played King Lear, the role King Lear, which I researched it, and a gentleman wrote a book where he interviewed all these famous guys you've heard of who played King Lear over time. Now women are playing the role, but the book was only men, and we're talking Laurence Olivier and people of that stature, Paul Scofield, and none of them said they ever got it right. They all said they never got it right. It's such a difficult role. Well, that made me feel great because I never got it right. But at the end of the night, when I laid on the ground and I was dead as a character, I had the most extraordinary sense of satisfaction and of accomplishment because I had climbed the mountain. I was done. And I can't say that anything as a director approaches that. I think it may be one reason people do great tragedies as actors, is this sense of accomplishment of something that you made. But in our business, it disappears. You don't care how good we were last night. We got to be good tonight. So,
Can I share something about that?
you can. Last comments.
So,
Final.
when Andrew was saying this, and Sam, when you were saying this, it reminded me of one of our students.
Yep.
His name is Mike. He's a Marine Corps veteran. He was an 0311, so an infantry, a combat infantry guy. No college degree, no college experience whatsoever. And he came back from Iraq with one missing leg. So here was this 23-year-old kid, young wife, and imagine, right, remember when you were 23, right? You were invincible, bulletproof, and so this 23-year-old kid, and he's thinking like, I just left the Marine Corps. I don't have a job. I have no skill sets whatsoever. I have a young, really, really beautiful wife. Will she stay with me? What do I do? Imagine all these things going through his head. And as he's going through our program to learn how to become a machinist, one day about 14 weeks into our program's 4 months long, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, he came to me and said, could I borrow one of your mills at night? So again, if any of you know Marines with a mill, that means that they want to make a weapon normally. So I said, well, tell me why. And he said, it's embarrassing. I said, all right, well, come into my office, shut the door. Why? Well, my leg is not right, so every time I walk on it, it bleeds and it hurts, so I don't want to wear a crutch because I don't want my wife to see it, but the VA said it will take me 18 months to get a new prosthesis. And I don't want to wait that long, and I want to build a new knee, a new ankle, new ankle. I said, oh, we can do that. So I put him in contact with one of our computer-aided designers. We had a task team associated with that. In 2 days, we not only came up with his ankle, but that was the first of 32 patents that we donated to the school. And the look on this kid's face when he graduated, it was one of the best experiences in my life when this kid was at the graduation ceremony walking by himself on the ankle that he had built in front of his wife with this degree that meant that he was going to have a career ahead of him. That was life-changing. That, I think, kind of wraps everything up.
Beautiful, beautiful. Andrew, anything you want to say before we take a breath, go watch a play?
That's really hard to follow up.
You don't have to. You don't have to.
No, I would just say, I think if the theme of tonight is the dignity and value of work, you know, our board chair has said in meetings that a rising tide raises all boats. And when we think about those most in need of our communities, to invest our time, to invest our money in wonderful programs like Workshops for Warriors, when we invest in those in our community to make the most of their careers, to sustain themselves and their families, it lifts all boats. And so I'm just immensely proud and privileged to be here with you tonight, and really excited to see the play.
Well, I appreciate you coming, Andrew. Andrew Picard is the VP of Operations at Workforce Partnership, which serves 100,000 people annually, helps them get jobs. And Hernán Prado, get that right? Yes. Is the founder and CEO of Workshops for Warriors, which trains veterans into high-skilled, high-paying jobs. The boat we're in tonight is called Salon. This happens once every show, every production we do, with people who are experts in the theme of the play that we're doing. As you can see, we don't talk about the play that much, it's more about the themes. Thank you for coming. We will be back here in August when our new season starts. I appreciate all of you coming, and I would like to thank Suzanne Hess, who is our sponsor, my sponsor of Salon. She's right here. We could give her an applause. Thank you for appreciate her help, and thank you, gentlemen, and enjoy a play written by the only woman to twice win the Pulitzer Prize for drama. This is her second time, this play. Enjoy.